this video is about. She hid in the attic until her father brought the town to her door. If this story touches your heart, please like the video and share your thoughts in comments. The scent of dust mixed with the faint trace of mildew was the first thing Alina noticed as she climbed the creaking stairs to the attic. The narrow staircase wound its way up from the dimly lit hallway of her childhood home, each step groaning under the weight of memories long buried. She hesitated at the door, her heart pounding in her chest. It had been years since she had last ventured up here, years since she had escaped to this sanctuary during the days of her father's raucous laughter and her mother's quiet despair. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open, wincing at the sound of the rusty hinges. The attic was a time capsule, a forgotten realm filled with cardboard boxes, old furniture draped in white sheets, and remnants of a life that seemed to belong to someone else. Dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through the single window, illuminating the cobwebs that adorned the rafters like ghostly lace. Alina stepped inside, her fingers brushing against the edges of boxes as she sought a path through the clutter. Each object held a story: the plastic toys she'd outgrown, the forgotten stuffed animals with matted fur, and the books whose spines were cracked from years of neglect. But it was the old trunk in the corner that drew her in. She could almost hear it calling to her, its rusty lock whispering secrets of the past. With a quick tug, she opened the trunk, the lid protesting as it lifted. Inside were her mother's old dresses, delicate fabrics that seemed to breathe nostalgia. She picked up a pale blue dress, its silk whispering against her skin. It was the one her mother had worn to her father's wedding, their wedding. Alina's fingers trembled as she traced the intricate lace that adorned the neckline, feeling an ache in her heart that she had long learned to suppress. "Mom," she whispered, the word escaping before she could catch it. The silence of the attic enveloped her like a shroud, and she felt a familiar heaviness settle in her chest. Her mother had left this world too soon, a casualty of a heart too tender for the burdens it bore. In her absence, Alina had learned to navigate the shadows of her father's anger and disappointment, often retreating to this attic to escape the storms that brewed below. As she stood there, lost in the memories woven into the fabric of her past, a sudden noise jolted her back to the present. The front door slammed shut, followed by the hurried footsteps of her father, Edwin, echoing through the house. She felt the instinctive pull of fear tighten in her stomach. He was home. Alina quickly shut the trunk, her heart racing. She didn't want to face him today. Not like this. Not with the weight of their shared grief still heavy in the air. She made her way to the small window, peering out through the glass smeared with dust, a perfect vantage point to observe the world without being seen. Her father's voice carried up the stairs, muffled but frantic. "Where are you, Alina? We need to talk." The desperation in his tone struck her like a physical blow. It was a peculiar mix of anger and concern, the kind that could ignite a flame or douse it entirely. Alina pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching the shadows of the trees sway in the autumn breeze. She could hear the faint sounds of the town outside, children laughing, the distant bark of a dog, and the rhythmic crunch of leaves underfoot. It reminded her of the life she had once known, a life where she felt safe. But safety had become a rare commodity, locked away like the treasures hidden in the attic. "Please, Alina," her father called again, the urgency in his voice sending shivers down her spine. "I can't do this alone." She closed her eyes, battling the tumult of emotions that threatened to spill over. It wasn't that she wanted to ignore her father, but the weight of their relationship felt insurmountable. He had become a stranger behind the mask of anger, a man lost in the labyrinth of his grief and his own demons. And she, a girl who had once adored him, felt like a mere ghost in his presence. As she stood there, torn between the urge to confront him and the desire to retreat further into the sanctuary of the attic. She remembered the way he used to narrate tales of adventure and bravery, how he'd filled their home with laughter and warmth. Those memories felt distant, obscured by the shadows of their recent past. Finally, she took a deep breath and made her decision. Maybe today was the day she would face the reality of their situation. With reluctant resolve, she stepped away from the window and made her way down the stairs, her heart pounding louder with each step. "Dad," she called softly, the word catching in her throat as it escaped. She hesitated at the bottom of the stairs, the living room before her a battleground of unspoken words and unresolved emotions. He turned, surprise etched across his features as he took in her presence. "Elena," he breathed, his voice a mix of relief and something darker. "There you are." I was just looking for something," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The truth hung in the air between them, heavy and unyielding. Edwin ran a hand through his tousled hair, a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of his mounting frustration. "We need to talk about what happened at the town meeting today. Is that why you're yelling?" She countered, her heart racing with the familiar sting of resentment. "I'm not a little kid anymore, Dad. You don't have to shout." He sighed heavily, the tension in his shoulders slackening slightly. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to raise my voice. This town needs us. We can't hide up here forever." His eyes bore into hers, pleading for understanding. Elena felt a rush of emotions she couldn't fully articulate. "What do you want me to do?" she asked, the challenge slipping from her lips before she could rein it in. "You want me to just step outside and pretend everything is fine?" "No," he said, his voice earnest. "I don't want you to pretend. I want you to be part of it, to be part of the community. They're worried about us, Elena, about you." The words hung in the air, heavy with implications. The townsfolk had watched her grow, nurtured her through her childhood, and now they were witnesses to the scars left behind by grief. "And what if I don't want to?" she replied, her voice trembling with defiance. "Then you risk losing everything," he shot back, frustration cracking through his calm demeanor. "You're isolating yourself and it's tearing me apart." "Maybe you should have thought about that before you started pushing everyone away," she countered. "I'm not the only one hiding, you know." Silence stretched between them, fraught with tension. They stood there, two people grappling with their own pain, caught in the crosshairs of their shared history. Edwin's eyes softened slightly, the anger ebbing away, replaced by a look of sorrow that mirrored her own. "I know," he whispered, the vulnerability in his voice cutting through her defenses. "I just want to protect you. I don't want you to feel alone in all of this." Elena's resolve began to waver, the walls she had built around herself trembling against the weight of his sincerity. "I want to be there for you too," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "But it's hard." "I know," he said again, stepping closer, his expression earnest and open. "Let's figure this out together. I don't want to fight. I want you to feel safe again." The fear and resentment in her heart began to crack, revealing a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to one another. And in that moment of quiet understanding, Elena realized that perhaps the attic wasn't just a refuge. It was also a reminder of the life she had yet to reclaim. "Okay," she said finally, her voice steadying. "Let's try." His eyes lit up with a flicker of hope, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she felt the weight of something heavy begin to lift. Maybe it was the dust of the past settling down, or perhaps it was the promise of new beginnings unfolding before them. Whatever it was a step towards the light, and she felt ready to embrace it. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the town as Elena sat on the porch steps, her mind a swirling tempest of thoughts. The air was cool, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves of the maple trees that lined the street, whispering secrets of summertime laughter and autumnal farewells. The scent of wood smoke began to waft through the air, mingling with the last sweet notes of late blooms. Beside her, Edwin settled into a weathered rocking chair, its rhythmic creaking providing a comforting backdrop to their tentative truce. For the first time in many weeks, the weight of silence between them felt less like a chasm and more like a space to navigate. He glanced over at her, his expression a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "Elena," he began, his voice low, as if too loud a tone might shatter the fragile peace they had forged. "I know you have your reservations about getting involved again. The town, it's changed, and so have we. But we can't stay hidden forever. Not you, not me." "I'm not hiding," she replied, her tone sharper than she intended. "I'm just taking my time." She turned her gaze to the street, watching the shadows lengthen and retreat as children played, their laughter echoing like music from a world she felt increasingly distant from. "Things are different now, Dad. It's not just about us anymore." He nodded slowly, a grave acceptance in his eyes. "I understand that, but it's not just about the past either. It's about the future. We've lost so much, Elena, your mother, our connection to the people who cared for us. I don't want to lose you too." "Then let me figure this out at my own pace," she said, leaning back against the porch rail, arms crossed defensively over her chest. "I don't want to rush into something just because you're ready to face it." A moment of silence hung heavy between them, both grappling with the memories of laughter and joy that had once filled their home, now overshadowed by loss. Edwin sighed, a deep, weary sound that resonated with the burden of his grief. "I'm not trying to push you, sweetheart. His voice faltered for a moment, as though the weight of his emotions was too much to bear. "I remember the way you used to light up when you'd hear the town band practicing for the summer festival. You loved to dance, to be part of something bigger than just us." Elena's heart clenched at the memory, her mother spinning her around in the living room, laughter bubbling between them as they danced to the echoes of distant music, the promise of summer nights and community thriving just outside their door. "I remember," she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of nostalgia. "But it feels like a lifetime ago." "It feels like a lifetime for all of us," he replied softly. He shifted in his chair, his eyes focused on the fading horizon. "But if we don't reconnect with that part of our lives, we might lose more than just memories. We could lose the people who still care, who still want to be there for us." "I think I'm scared," she admitted, a lump forming in her throat. "What if the town doesn't want us back? What if they remember the way things were, the way I used to be, and see me as something broken?" Edwin turned to her, his gaze steady, searching for a flicker of understanding in her eyes. "You're not broken, Elena. You're healing. And no one in that town expects you to be the same person you were before. They just want to see you, to know you're okay. They want to help." "You mean you want them to help?" she countered. "You need them to help." There was a moment of stillness, and in it she could see the lines of worry etched on his face, the weight of his loneliness pressing down on him. "Maybe," he conceded, his voice quieter now. "But it's not just for me. It's for you too. I want you to feel like you're part of something again. You deserve that." Elena bit her lip, feeling the sting of tears welling in her eyes. She had been so focused on her own pain, her own fears, that she had forgotten the strength of the community that had surrounded her for so long. She thought of Mrs. Thompson, the elderly neighbor who would bring over freshly baked cookies just for the joy of sharing, or the children who had once chased her in the playground, their laughter echoing in her ears. "Maybe I could go to the next town meeting," she said slowly, testing the waters of her own resolve. "Just to see, to listen." Edwin's face brightened, a flicker of hope igniting in his weary eyes. "That's a start. You don't have to engage if you're not ready. Just being there, even in silence, is a step forward. I'll be there with you." Yeah, but what if everyone stares? What if they talk? She asked, feeling the familiar anxiety creeping in. We'll face it together, he replied, his voice firm with reassurance. And if it gets too overwhelming, we can leave. No one is going to make you do anything you don't want to do. She nodded slowly, the idea of stepping back into the world feeling both exhilarating and terrifying. Okay, she said at last, her heart racing with the challenge ahead. Let's do it. The sun had fully set now, leaving a twilight glow that bathed their porch in a soft, warm light. As they sat in the fading warmth of the day, something shifted between them. It was as if they had laid down their weapons, allowing the possibility of connection to flourish once more. Do you remember when we used to make up stories about the townsfolk? Edwin asked, a hint of a smile creeping onto his lips. You would come up with the wildest tales. Elena laughed, the sound surprising her. Of course, like how Mr. Daniels always wore that ridiculous hat because he believed it gave him special powers. Or how Mrs. Jenkins claimed she could talk to the squirrels, he added, chuckling. They shared a moment of lightness, reveling in the warmth of their shared memories, the laughter that had once filled their home now spilling freely between them. Maybe we can start sharing those stories again, she suggested, feeling the weight of her past lift just a little more. At the meeting, I mean, we could bring some of that joy back. I'd like that, Edwin replied, his voice filled with a new kind of hope. We can remind everyone that we're still here, that we can still be part of this community, but it starts with us. As the stars appeared one by one in the night sky, Elena felt a sense of calm settle over her, a tentative promise that perhaps, through vulnerability and courage, they could reclaim the pieces of their lives they thought lost forever. Thank you for not giving up on me, she said softly, turning to her father. Their eyes met, and in that moment they understood each other in a way that transcended words. I'll never give up on you, he promised, his voice steady and full of love. As the night wrapped around them, they sat in comfortable silence, the air filled with the faint sounds of the town settling down for the evening. And just like that, the attic no longer felt like a refuge from the world, but a reminder of who they were and who they could become again, together. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the sun pouring through the kitchen window like warm honey. Elena stood by the sink, rinsing a mug, her mind still swirling from the conversations of the previous night. The prospect of attending the town meeting loomed heavily over her, a mix of anticipation and trepidation settling in her stomach. She could hear Edwin humming softly to himself as he shuffled about, preparing breakfast. Do you want eggs or toast? He called from the stove, his voice cheerful, an attempt to keep things light. Both, she replied, a hint of a smile twitching at the corners of her mouth. It felt good to banter with him, to feel their connection rekindling like a smoldering flame. As she turned to face him, she couldn't help but notice the way the morning light caught the strands of silver in his hair, the lines around his eyes deepening with a mixture of age and worry. He was a man who had endured too much, and it pained her to think of how she had turned away from him during the darkest periods of their lives. Are you nervous? He asked, flipping a pancake with ease. A little. She leaned against the counter, crossing her arms as she watched him. What if they all stare at me like I'm some kind of freak show? Edwin chuckled softly, the sound soothing like a balm. You're not a freak show, Elena. They've missed you. They're probably more curious about how you're doing than anything else. I don't know if I can handle that, she said, the anxiety rising like bile in her throat. What if they ask me questions I can't answer? What if they expect me to be the old me? Then we'll take it one step at a time, he replied, his voice steady. Just be yourself, that's all anyone wants. She nodded, though doubts still lingered in her mind like stubborn shadows. Just as she was about to voice her concerns, the doorbell rang, jolting her from her thoughts. Edwin raised an eyebrow, curiosity evident on his face. "Want me to get it?" he asked, glancing toward the door. "No, I'll do it," she said, feeling a surge of determination. Perhaps it was time to face not just the meeting, but the world outside as well. With a deep breath, she crossed the threshold to the living room, peering through the peephole. To her surprise, it was Mrs. Thompson, the sweet old woman from down the street, her gray hair pulled back into a neat bun, a plate of cookies in hand. Elena opened the door, forcing a smile. "Hi, Mrs. Thompson." "Good morning, dear," she exclaimed, her voice bright and cheerful. "I brought you some cookies. Figured you could use a little pick-me-up before the meeting." Elena's heart warmed at the gesture. "That's so sweet of you. Thank you." She stepped aside to let Mrs. Thompson in, and the elderly woman bustled in, her presence filling the room with an air of warmth. "Your father and I were just talking about the meeting tonight," she said, setting the plate down on the kitchen table and giving Edwin a knowing smile. "I'm so glad to see you both together again. It's been too long." "We're giving it a go," Edwin replied, his voice tinged with hope, "trying to reconnect. I'm proud of you both. It's never easy, but you're not alone. The whole town cares, you know." Elena felt a knot in her throat at the words. "Do you really think so?" she asked, vulnerability creeping into her voice. "Of course. You've grown up in this town, Elena. We've watched you blossom into a beautiful young woman, and we've all missed you terribly." As Mrs. Thompson spoke, Elena felt her defenses slowly start to erode. For so long, she had wrapped herself in the armor of isolation, convinced that the outside world would only reflect her pain. But here was this woman, a fixture in her life, extending kindness without expectation. "Thank you," she said, her voice sincere. "It means a lot to hear that." "Goodness, don't mention it." Mrs. Thompson waved her hand dismissively. "Now let's get those cookies out. They're still warm, I promise you. Nothing like a little sugar to give you a boost before facing the crowd." As they settled around the table, the aroma of fresh cookies enveloped them, and Edwin shared a story about a particularly rambunctious town meeting from years ago. Laughter bubbled between them, and with every exchange, Elena felt lighter, the weight of her hesitation beginning to lift. "Do you remember when you tried to organize the first summer festival?" Mrs. Thompson asked, a twinkle in her eye. "You were a little whirlwind, storming in with plans and posters. It was like you had the whole town buzzing." Elena laughed, her cheeks flushing with the memory. "I wanted to bring everyone together. I thought if we had something to celebrate, it might help people forget their troubles, even if just for a day." "And it did," Edwin chimed in, pride evident in his tone. "You were the life of that festival. I think it was one of the best times this town has seen in years." Elena felt a warmth blossoming in her chest, a sense of belonging she had buried under layers of grief. "I guess I did care about this town once," she said softly, more to herself than to her companions. "Of course you did," Mrs. Thompson said, leaning forward, her expression earnest. "And you still can. The town needs people like you, the ones who have a passion for life. You're not just part of it, you can lead it." The words hung in the air, heavy with possibility. Just then, the doorbell rang again, breaking the moment. Elena exchanged glances with Edwin and Mrs. Thompson before she stood up to answer it, curiosity piquing once more. This time, the visitors were two familiar faces, Mary and Tim, childhood friends who had once been staples in her life, their laughter ringing through the neighborhood like music. They stood hesitantly on the porch, expressions a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "Elena," Mary said, her voice almost a whisper as if testing the waters. "Hey, Mary, Tim." Elena's heart raced as she opened the door wider. "What are you guys doing here?" "We wanted to see you," Tim said, stepping forward with a grin. "We heard you were back in town and figured we'd drop by. Maybe we could walk to the meeting together." The invitation felt like a lifeline, and Alina's initial instinct was to retreat, but instead she felt her resolve harden. "Sure, that sounds great." Mary's face lit up and a spark ignited in the air. "Really? That would be awesome. It's just a little walk down the street. We can catch up like old times." As they all made their way into the house, Mrs. Thompson exchanged knowing glances with Edwin, her smile wide and reminiscent of the lightness that had filled the kitchen moments before. "Now isn't this just perfect?" she said, her voice a blend of joy and nostalgia. Old friends coming together again. Alina felt a fluttering in her chest. It was strange how quickly everything seemed to change. The weight of grief was still there, like an unwelcome guest, but she could feel the edges softening, a possibility of hope creeping in through the cracks. "Okay, let's go grab our jackets," she said, her voice steady. The smile on her face felt foreign but authentic, a sign of the shift she was beginning to embrace. "I'm ready." As they gathered their things, laughter filled the small house, the kind of laughter that echoed with memories and possibility. Edwin stood at the doorway as they prepared to leave, a proud smile resting on his lips. "Remember, one step at a time," he said, his voice filled with encouragement. "And if it gets too much, we can leave. You don't have to face it all at once." "I know," Alina replied, glancing back at him. "But I think I want to try. I think I'm ready." With that, she stepped out into the sunlight, her friends flanking her on either side. And together, they began the walk down the familiar street that felt both foreign and comforting. Each step resonated with promise, a declaration that she would not be defined by her pain, but instead would forge ahead to reclaim her place in a community that had once cradled her heart. As they walked, the laughter and chatter of children filled the air, mingling with the scent of freshly cut grass and blooming flowers, creating a vibrant tapestry of life that enveloped her. For the first time in a long while, Alina felt the stirring of something beautiful, a belief that maybe, just maybe, she could carve out a new path, one that embraced her past while welcoming the bright potential of her future. And somewhere deep within her, she knew that she was no longer just hiding in the attic, but stepping boldly into the light of a life yet to be lived. As they walked through the familiar streets of Elmwood, Alina felt the weight of each step resonate with a mixture of hope and apprehension. The sun hung high in the sky, casting long shadows that danced along the pavement. Mary and Tim chatted animatedly beside her, their voices a comforting backdrop as they navigated the path toward the town hall. "Can you believe it's been almost 3 years since we last saw you?" Mary exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. She wore a denim jacket, its sleeves rolled up, and her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, a reflection of carefree days that Alina once shared. 3 years, Alina echoed, her voice tinged with disbelief. It felt both surreal and painfully tangible, the years that had slipped through her fingers like sand. "It feels like a lifetime." Tim chuckled, shaking his head. "I remember how you used to drag us to the library every Saturday. You'd have a stack of books taller than you were, and we'd just follow you like lost puppies." Alina smiled at the memory, her heart warming at the thought of those simpler times. "I think I was trying to turn you both into bookworms. More like you were trying to turn us into your personal cheerleaders for whatever fantastical world you were diving into." Tim winked, nudging her playfully. Mary laughed, her voice bright and airy. "And we were happy to oblige. You had a way of making stories come alive. It was like you were the narrator of our childhoods." The nostalgia enveloped Alina, and for the first time she felt a flicker of the girl she used to be, the one who laughed easily and let her imagination run wild. "I miss that," she admitted softly, her voice barely audible over the sound of their footsteps. "I miss us." The trio rounded a corner, and the town hall came into view, the brick facade standing proud against the azure sky. It was a building that had witnessed countless gatherings, from jubilant celebrations to heartfelt discussions. Today, however, it felt different, as if it were bracing itself for something meaningful. "Are you ready?" Mary asked, her expression shifting to one of concern as she glanced at Alina. Alina took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. "I think so. Just keep talking. I'll follow your lead." "You got it," Tim replied, a confident grin on his face. "We've got your back." As they approached the entrance, a small crowd had already gathered outside, buzzing with a mix of anticipation and chatter. A sense of familiarity washed over Alina. These were the faces of her childhood, people who had once been woven into the fabric of her life. Yet, as she stepped closer, an undercurrent of anxiety bubbled within her. "Look, there's Mrs. Jenkins." Mary pointed, her voice a whisper of excitement. "She's still wearing that ridiculous hat." Alina squinted, trying to catch a glimpse of the woman who had always claimed to speak to the birds. Sure enough, Mrs. Jenkins stood at the entrance, her flamboyant hat adorned with feathers and baubles, waving enthusiastically at passers-by. Alina's heart fluttered, a blend of warmth and apprehension tightening in her chest. "Come on, let's go say hi," Tim urged, already heading toward the entrance. Alina followed, her legs feeling heavy as if they were dragging her back into the safety of her memories. "Mrs. Jenkins," Mary called, her voice bright and inviting. The elderly woman turned, her eyes lighting up as she recognized the trio. "Oh, my sweet dears, look who's back, it's Alina." Her voice, though slightly cracked with age, was filled with warmth. "You've grown into a stunning young lady, just like your mama." Alina felt a lump form in her throat at the mention of her mother. "Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins. It's good to see you." The elderly woman stepped forward, enveloping Alina in a surprisingly strong embrace. "We've missed you, my dear. The town hasn't been the same without your spirit lighting it up." "Really?" Alina whispered, her voice trembling slightly. I thought everyone might have forgotten me." "Forgotten you? Never." Mrs. Jenkins shook her head vehemently. "You're a part of this town's heart. We've all been waiting for you to find your way back." The sincerity in her words warmed Alina's heart, and for the first time she felt a flicker of hope spark within her. As they stepped aside to allow others to enter, the crowd shifted, and Alina caught sight of familiar faces, neighbors, friends, and even teachers from her school days. Each smile was a reminder of a shared past, a past that she had left behind but was now reaching out to embrace her again. Just then, Edwin emerged from the throng, his expression a mixture of pride and anxiety as he spotted her. "There you are." He approached, extending his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "I was hoping I wouldn't lose you in the crowd." "I'm right here," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I came with Mary and Tim." "Good," he responded, a hint of relief in his tone. "I'm proud of you for taking this step." Alina looked up at her father, the corner of her mouth lifting into a smile. "Thanks, it feels different." "Different can be good," he replied softly, his eyes searching hers for understanding. "Just remember, we're in this together." As they entered the town hall, the atmosphere shifted. The room buzzed with energy, the air thick with a mix of anticipation and nervousness. Rows of chairs were set up facing a makeshift stage, where the town's mayor, a portly man with a jovial demeanor, stood ready to address the crowd. "Welcome, everyone," the mayor boomed, his voice echoing off the walls. "Thank you for coming tonight. We're here to discuss the future of Elmwood and how we can come together as a community." Alina felt her heart race as she took a seat beside her father. The chairs were filled with familiar faces, and her gaze swept over the crowd, searching for anyone else who might offer comfort. She noticed Mrs. Thompson seated in the front row, her smile warm and reassuring as she waved at Alina. Turn to each other, share stories, and let's rekindle the connections that make us strong, the mayor continued, his voice filled with enthusiasm. Tonight is about embracing our past while moving forward together. And let's not forget, we have a special guest who has something to share. A ripple of excitement ran through the crowd as Edwin stood up, drawing Alina's attention. "Dad, what are you doing?" she whispered, panic rising in her chest. "Just sharing a few thoughts," he replied, his voice calm despite the tension visible in his posture. He stepped toward the front, the crowd parting to allow him a clear path. Alina's heart pounded in her chest, an unsettling mix of pride and worry coursing through her veins. "Thank you for having me," Edwin began, his voice steady as he faced the crowd. "I know the past few years have been challenging for all of us. My family has felt the weight of loss too, but I stand here tonight because I believe in our community." He paused, scanning the faces in the crowd, each one filled with anticipation. "I believe in the strength we have when we come together. I can tell you that it's easy to hide, to retreat into ourselves when things get tough, but there's also strength in vulnerability." Alina held her breath, feeling the weight of his words. She could see the flicker of hope in the eyes of those around her, a shared understanding of the struggles they had all faced. "I want my daughter, Alina, to know that she can step back into this community and feel welcomed," Edwin continued, gesturing toward her. "And I hope all of you will recognize the importance of opening your hearts to those who are trying to find their way back. We're all carrying something, and it's time we support each other in our journeys." The crowd erupted into applause, and Alina felt her cheeks flush with a mix of gratitude and embarrassment. She hadn't expected her father to address her in such a public way, but his words resonated deeply. As the clapping quieted, Edwin concluded, "Let us be there for one another. Let's rebuild what we've lost and celebrate what we still have. Thank you." He returned to his seat, and Alina met his gaze, her heart swelling with pride. "That was amazing," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "I just spoke from the heart," he replied, his smile genuine. "And I wanted you to know that you're not alone in this." The mayor resumed his address, but Alina found it hard to concentrate, her mind racing and heart pounding. She felt emboldened by her father's words, a spark igniting within her. Perhaps this was the moment she had needed, a sign that she could embrace her past while stepping into her future. As the mayor invited others to share their thoughts, Alina felt the urge to stand up, to voice her own journey. But the fear of vulnerability rooted her in her chair. Yet, the warmth of the community surrounding her began to chip away at her insecurities, allowing the courage to bubble up from within. "Let's do this," she whispered too,